Welcome to the 2023 spring edition of the Key Spouse Engagement Series, focusing on the Key Spouse Program Refresh. My name is Andrea Perkins, and I work at Headquarters Air Force in the Airmen and Family Care Division. I'll be dual-hatted today as your MC/presenter for this event. We know that you have very, very busy schedules, especially this time of year, and really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We also appreciate you for hanging with us as we've been promising Key Spouse program updates for coming up on 2 years now. Today, we're ready to talk about some of those updates we're making and answer the questions that you have on what we're doing to be better and address the concerns and challenges you've been facing in your roles. But before we reveal the long-awaited Key Spouse Program Refresh works in progress, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Shireen Brown, spouse of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, and Mrs. Jennifer Saltzman, spouse of the Chief of Space Operations, General B. Chance Saltzman, to give opening remarks.
Oh, hey, Andrea, and hello to all of our spouses from around the globe. This is actually quite wonderful. I'm so glad that you all are here. I should say good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening for some of us. Well, whatever time it is where you are, we are happy to have you here in the Zoom room with us. You know, the sun is quite bright where I'm located right now, and I've got my cup of tea in order to make sure that I'm awake. This is my first cup today, so hopefully that will be a good thing. And hopefully you have your favorite beverage with you to kind of keep you going throughout our session today. So as always, we appreciate that you are taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us on this Key Spouse engagement titled Refresh. I always enjoy the time that we get to spend together, and I'm grateful for the A1S and the AFPC teams for all the thought and effort that they put into this Key Spouse program, where we are and what lies ahead. I'm immensely grateful for their coordinating this event for us today and to share the progress that has been made and to answer any of our questions. So for almost 2 years now, we have been collecting feedback from our command teams and from you, the key spouses. As you well know, the Department of the Air Force is diverse, and to refresh our program means to meet the needs of everyone, and that has not been an easy feat. So I hope today provides our key spouses with some encouragement with the way ahead. How we proceed is based on the feedback both you, our key spouses, and our command teams have provided. So as we come together, I encourage you to engage in the chat with everyone. This interaction helps us to see that the experiences, challenges, and successes with the program have similarities and differences. I look forward to the discussion that's sure to come. So right now, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Saltzman. Are you okay there, Mrs. Saltzman?
We'll see. I don't know. Can you see me?
I think so. Well,
okay.
Wait,
Awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah, we can see and hear you, ma'am.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, again, apologies. I was like, I saw myself earlier and then it went away and I don't know how to click it back. So my apologies, but good morning to everybody. Thank you so much, Mrs. Brown, and appreciate her always dedication. She, went on TDY this morning already. She's already flown somewhere super early and jumped in and wanted to be able to make sure to participate with everybody. Really do appreciate the time that you're taking. Everybody, it's May, it's, graduations, it's, almost moving season and all kinds of things. So really do appreciate you taking the time to help us learn more about this refresh program. And it's because of all of you guys that this program works. So again, appreciate your time. Thank you, Andrea, and everybody else. And look forward to hearing about what's going on. So Andrea, take it away.
Thank you so much, ma'am. See if I can start my video. There we go. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Saltzman. We appreciate your time, not just today, but all the time you spend championing initiatives for the betterment of military families to include your insights, experience, and leadership with the Key Spouse program. So thank you for today and for always being an advocate for us. Again, my name is Andrea Perkins from the Airmen and Family Care Division at Headquarters Air Force. I've been working with the Key Spouse program for about a year and a half now. During that entire time, as Mrs. Brown mentioned, we've been conducting surveys and questionnaires, gathering feedback, listening to spouses and families, taking questions, trying to figure out the best future for the Key Spouse program, and trying to figure that out for all stakeholders. Thank you to everyone, many of you on the line today, who've engaged with us along the way, who've provided insights and feedbacks, who've asked tough questions, who've given great recommendations. We have taken it all for consideration, and we certainly appreciate it. Keep it coming. We love to hear your feedback. We love to hear your challenges. We love to hear what's working well, and we love to address them. So thank you for engaging. All right. Let me show you if my slides work. There we go. Let me show you the overview of what we are going to talk about today. In about an hour, we will plan to take a break. So I don't know where that will be in this agenda because we're really trying to make sure that we're addressing questions as we go along. So it might take a long time, it might take a short time in this agenda to get to an hour. And so we'll take a break at some point, a 10-minute intermission. We hope that this event is a true engagement filled with conversation, discussion, chatting. I have some slides put together to talk us through some of the changes that we've made and address the questions that we've received in advance. And then we'll also answer your questions throughout. I'll pause after each segment to review what's been asked in the chat and then address those questions, those comments, and do that throughout the engagement. All right. I also kindly request that unless you're just saying hello to me, which I definitely don't want to discourage, please make sure that you're, other than that, not sending a chat directly to me. It is not my gift to try to talk, read, and type to respond to you at the same time. And if, as we close out this session, if I just miss it in the chat, which is a big probability given I'm doing so much of the talking, it's just gone forever. And we want to make sure that we capture all of the questions that we received so we can compile them in a Q&A and post them at the AFPC Key Spouse website. We'll also post the recording of today's event and the slides at the AFPC Key Spouse website. So you'll have an opportunity to view them there. If you're not comfortable with submitting questions in the chat in front of 156 of your closest friend, it looks like is the participant count right now, we have other opportunities for you to engage. So please feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is andrea.perkins.2@us.af.mil. You do not need to commit that to memory. I'll have it on a slide and a future slide so you can see it there. Alternatively, we also have an opportunity to provide feedback at the end, as we do in all of our engagements. And that's another way that you can ask a question or provide some feedback without having to post something in the chat. If we don't get to all of your questions today, we'll try our best. Again, they'll be wrapped up in the Q&A sheet after the conclusion of this presentation. And then also last night we stayed on, I think, for 40 extra minutes to address people who just wanted to chat with us and ask questions while after we were officially done with the engagement, but they still wanted to chat and interact, and that's fine. We'll have an opportunity to do that after as well. All right. The last thing I want to discuss about what we'll post at the AFPC Key Spouse website is a timeline. And so we know that we haven't been real transparent in the process of what we're trying to fix and address. And so we will make that timeline and make that available to you so that you can see what we've been working on and what progress that we've made. So that will be available as well. At this point, let me pause and make sure there aren't any questions or comments in the chat regarding where you can find things. Okay, I don't see any. All right. Before we take a look at where we're going, I think it's important to take a look at where we've been. In the late 90s, the Key Spouse program was a quality of life initiative modeled after the Navy Ombudsman program. Each MAGCOM had a different look and name to their program. Throughout the next decade, up until 2009, there was a voluntary implementation that was eventually adopted by all MAGCOMs. The year of the Air Force family, 2009, is when the Key Spouse program really took off. It's during this time that there was a requirement to assess the Key Spouses and appoint them, in addition to the mandate to utilize the initial training curriculum. Around 2009 to 2016, there was an annual memo released by the CSAF that emphasized the importance of the Key Spouse program. For years, this annual memo was the only guidance on the program. In 2018, based on feedback from you or people serving in your roles at the time, a virtual Key Spouse initial training was implemented. In 2021, just a few years back, we really started to look at program revitalization to discern if the program had evolved with military families over time, or if and where we needed to make updates to meet the needs of the modern Air and now Space Force families. So at this same time in 2021, and I'll show you this later, the CSAF, CSO, CMSAF, CMSIF, and their spouses released a memo that again encouraged utilization of the Key Spouse program by commanders and provided a survey so that we could gather feedback. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. This time frame, 2021, was also when we launched the first Key Spouse engagement, which was really a series to be mostly connected with you, more closely connected with you, and address issues and concerns that you've raised to us. So throughout history, the Key Spouse program has been a CSAF program executed by commanders, with military and family readiness centers eventually getting an administrative role. This construct will remain, and it's also part of what makes this program so complicated. And throughout our time together today, we'll talk more about that. All right. I don't see anything in the chat with questions about history, so I will keep pressing on. All right, so this Key Spouse program refresh slide shows an overview of some of the main things we have been getting after. One of the main things, the first one there on your screen, is to rename. What do we do with this program? What do we call it? I'll go into more detail on this in the next slide, but the real important thing to us is to have a program name that is both inclusive of everybody who wants to be a part of the Key Spouse program, and then also descriptive of what the position entails. We understand that we have to have a plan to roll this out and incorporate the changes. We are neck deep in strategic communication plans to identify the key stakeholders, how we best communicate with them, and what needs to be communicated to roll out this refreshed program. We're not just going to one day snap our fingers and say, hey, now do all the new things. So we have a plan to release it. Next, we looked at the objectives, and if the objectives we had were meeting the needs of our modern families. I expect that we'll have many questions on this as we go through, and we'll discuss it in more detail in upcoming slides. But where we landed on the objectives, where we agreed everybody could be working towards, is readiness, resources, and connectedness. Those are the mainstays of the refreshed Key Spouse program. Another big thing that we looked at was the training. We know that you, the key spouses, are busy volunteers. Therefore, we really needed to modernize so that we had an asynchronous, virtual, and shortened initial training so that you could accomplish it at your convenience that fit into your schedule. It's also not lost on us the importance of the local connections. And so the last piece of the initial key spouse training will be a connection piece with the military and family readiness centers. And again, that will be in just a few more slides. I'll go into more detail. The last mainstay that we know needs refreshing are the tools we make available to you. Again, as very busy volunteers, there is just not the time to start a program from scratch. We need to provide what it is that you need to be successful. So we're continuing to go through what we offer in terms of tools, resources, and templates to make it easily adaptable to suit your needs. And then we have amazing teammates from the Five and Thrive team and Miss Ann Parker, who will show us an outstanding resource that they created and is available to you. And then furthermore, one of the main complaints we hear from key spouses is a lack of engagement from command teams. So from our seat, we think there are several things that we can do to help improve that interaction. And again, the strategic communication plan is something I'll talk more detail about as we go through this presentation, but I think that it could really help with our engagement with commanders and helping them to engage with you. If you have questions on these, feel free to post them in the chat so you don't lose your train of thought, but I will cover each of these in more detail as we go through. So the first thing is the name, the new name of the Key Spouse program. If you joined the renaming town halls, thank you. We appreciate that conversation, the feedback that you were able to provide there, and we'll talk briefly about that feedback today. And so the top portion of the slide talks about why rename? Well, in the 2021 was the first real questionnaire that we pushed out in our campaign for feedback and address the challenges and make the changes we need to for this program. And two of the top challenges were lack of spouse engagement and overcoming negative stigma. So we don't believe that this for sure, a name change is absolutely going to fix the lack of engagement and overcoming negative stigma, not a name change alone. But we do think that it will be helpful. It will help people to have a new idea about what the Key Spouse program can do for them with the new name. We recognize that not everybody has had a great experience in working with the Key Spouse program, and that makes them less likely to want to be a part of it as they move and relocate to different military bases and communities. And so if we have refreshed it with new name and new other things, which we'll talk about today, then we think that that will help increase engagement and reduce the stigma that comes along with what the program is today. In the middle part, you'll see that there are also some other statistics that we gathered from the next questionnaire. 42% of the respondents thought that the Key Spouse program did, in fact, represent the objectives and visions, which means over half either had no opinion on this, thought it neither did nor didn't, or really didn't think that it represented the objectives and visions of the program. And then 46% thought the name Key Spouse program was inclusive, which again meant over half did not. And that let us know probably time for a name change. Then we did a commander engagement survey. 79% of those respondents thought that we should rename. So here we have pretty good indicators that we need to change the name. So what do we call it? The bottom of your screen shows a couple of the questionnaires that we did to help find a name. And let me tell you, we have had hundreds of names that have been submitted for consideration that we've pushed out for review or feedback or crowdsourced. And these were the top ones. So Unit Support Liaison Team, Key Spouse Program, and Commander's Liaison Support Program. And so of those, Unit Support Liaison or Team led the way. They had the most support. We also think that if we kept Key Support Program, if we kept the key in there, that would not be helpful in overcoming the negative stigma, because key is still part of the title, right? It's not a big enough change. And then with the Commander's Liaison and Commander Support Program, the feedback from commanders was that they did not like that. So of those top three, the Unit Support Liaison, Unit Support Team really for us was the most viable option, because it checked the boxes of all of the things that we knew we needed to change the name for. Then we thought, well, these names are kind of boring, so maybe we can zazz it up and do some kind of an acronym to be more modern, more cool, more fun. And we did not do a good job. As in, we pushed the names out there, but we gave no really background on why and where they came from. And so that was one of the main reasons that we wanted to do the renaming town hall, because we wanted to know if we were able to give you some more information on the why, would it make more sense to call our program and our people one of these things, one of these acronyms? And so we gauged from that experience. We did have people cast a vote on which name they liked the best. It wasn't anything like super official. It was just kind of a gauge to see what people were feeling and thinking after we gave a little better background. And so in session one, it was a dead heat in the renaming town hall. 44% voted for Fusion. That's the one that they liked the best. And 44% voted for Unit Support Liaison or Unit Support Team. In session two, it leaned a little bit more towards Fusion. And then Unit Support Team was the clear second option that people liked best. And so that we just are taking that for consideration and for feedback. And ultimately, this is what we know. We are not going to make everybody happy. There are going to be people who do not like the name, but what we hope to do is by having engagements like the renaming town hall and engagements like this, even if you liked option A as the best option, but option B was the one that was picked, that you can understand the rationale as to why and buy into that as the new program name. And so the next step for us, we have provided lots of opportunities through questionnaires, through engagements, interactions, lots of feedback from key spouses on thoughts of the name. Our next step is to make sure that we are giving commanders whose program it belongs to the same opportunities to provide feedback on the name. Let them know what we've learned, what we've done, what our front runners are, and hear their feedback before we make a selection. Ultimately, you, the stakeholders, will be making that determination based on the feedback that we've gathered. And so that's the next step. We hoped to have a new name selected by the 31st of May. I think we might slide to the right a little bit, but not by much. I think that we could still get it accomplished here in the early summer, and then not actually roll out the program itself till the 1st of January. That gives us time to execute our communication plan, to let them know, hey, here's what's changing. And so that when 1 January comes, we have a smooth transition into what a new program looks like. With that, I will pause for some questions. Denise, is there anything?
There are actually not any questions currently in the chat.
Okay. Awesome. Right. All right. So I do see a comment that if the new name has to be explained, it's probably not good. Yeah, we have heard that and we understand that and we take that for consideration. We also know that the Key Spouse program at one point had to be explained. And here we are today with some pretty good understanding of what it is. So I think that if the problem here, whatever we name the program, if we fail in our marketing campaign and our communications plan of what it is, what it represents, how to get involved, all those things, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's not going to go over well, right? And so that is a huge focus of ours right now to make sure we do that right and market it in a way that makes sense so that we are all on the same page of what it can do for our families, what it can do for our command teams, and what we need to do to be successful. So, well, we have taken that for consideration and think that the marketing strategy and messaging campaign is the most important thing for whichever name is selected.
Yes, ma'am. To that comment, I think some of the previous conversation was missed. It's not saying that Fusion isn't a good name, or even that Family and Unit Support Team in Action isn't a good name. It was just that the acronym should match what it spells out, and
Gotcha.
action being assumed that the SION doesn't pair up, that part might not necessarily be a good idea. Over.
Understood. Thank you for sharing. Yes, it is a very progressive name, right? Fusion. It doesn't exactly line up. We're tracking, ma'am. Thank you for that feedback. All right. Keep those questions coming. If I missed it this time around, there are other opportunities. We'll circle back around and make sure that we capture all the questions in the chat. All right. I do see, let me address, I know that Chief Farrell, Mr. Farrell is here. So thanks for being on today, sir. One of the questions that we got is how if the Air Force Aid Society could support well, he's here supporting, he's being part of the conversation. So we'll engage with the Air Force Aid Society and see how we can help with the Key Spouse program moving forward. So thanks for being here, sir. And thanks for engaging in the chat. All right, the Key Spouse refresh objectives. The previous ones are there on your screen. And so for those listening on the phone, those previous objectives were to improve outreach and engagements, increase awareness of resources, strengthen family connectedness, support families during separation, and continuously enhance information flow. And so when we did the commander engagement survey that I referenced earlier, one of the most disheartening bits of information we gleaned from that is that a large majority of respondents felt like the Key Spouse program was not meeting the needs of our families. And so we need to refresh the objectives, right? And so there are many things to consider. What are we trying to do here? And so we know right off the bat that we have an Air Force that is established and has a structure, has a culture, and we have a Space Force that's establishing those things. They're growing up. They're building their own culture. We don't really know what that is going to look like, but we need to have a program that is flexible enough to grow with what it is that are unique to the Space Force families and give them the opportunity and the resources that they need to be successful with this program. So we already know that there's some things to consider there. Additionally, if you've ever thought about we'll see if my slides work here. There we go. What the differences might be in active duty, guard, and reserve, it is extensive. We hear very different things from what active duty units need and what guard and reserve units need. I will tell you also that we meet monthly with our guard and reserve counterparts to make sure that we are in lockstep with what those components need to be successful in the Key Spouse program. And so we have to consider what is different and what is the same between the components so that we can give them the tools that they need to operate under these new objectives. And if you ever think about how diverse the squadrons are and the cultures of those squadrons across the Department of the Air Force, think of all of the different types of jobs that people have and the different types of cultures that they have based on those types of jobs, right? So we have, just think about the diversity. We have CE, we have flying units, we have defenders, we have maintainers, we have comm folks, we have medical folks, we have space folks, we have logistics readiness people, we have legal professionals, we have force support professionals, we have an Air Force band. Like, there is so much diversity that is represented throughout the Department of the Air Force, and each of those units have very unique cultures and needs to support their families. Then we have these little green dots that represent all the different personnel and considerations that go within that. So we have organizations that are largely civilian. We have families that live in, the bases are in very rural communities, and most of them live on base. We have very urban communities, and they have hour commutes in every direction. We have OCONUS considerations, CONUS considerations, a gazillion considerations of the different types of settings that the Key Spouse program needs to work in and needs to work under. And so how do we equip commanders with objectives that are attainable and executable? And so what we wanted to do was provide command teams from active duty, guard, reserve, air, and space with diverse mission sets and diverse personnel with the flexibility to work towards 3 common goals. And those are readiness, resources, and connectedness. So we want our families and our key spouses to be able to connect with families, to be able to connect with each other, to be able to connect their units with the resources they need that will also enable mission readiness. So what do each of these look like? Readiness, I think of immediately as deployment, right? I think a lot of us do. But more than that, especially maybe for the Guard and Reserve components who perhaps aren't deploying as much, is financial readiness, employment readiness, the things that we need to consider to make healthy and happy families. And so the idea here is to make a playbook that commanders can choose from that really fits the needs of their unit. So equip them with the tool and resources they need to be successful. Then we have resources, which is pretty straightforward to know who's who. I say the faces and the places. We got some real good feedback from key spouses in the pre-engagement, like the questionnaire that we pushed out. And then also last night, the importance of making sure that key spouses know that the job is to connect to resources and not necessarily be a problem fixer. And so making sure we clearly outline that as we go through our training, as we go through our playbook, like the connector to resources rather than the fixer. And then connectedness, I think, is one of the broadest objective to accomplish. We got a lot of feedback coming up to this engagement and throughout the last few years on funding and fundraising, and connectedness is the piece that will probably fall under. And so connectedness could look very different. Connectedness is social media, like making sure that people know where to go to find out what's up. It could be social gatherings. It could be the bundles that people put together for the new babies. It could be the food that you have at some kind of event or gathering. And so we want to make it so that commanders have the flexibility to meet the needs of the population under the realm of connectedness, but we also understand we need to be more clear on the roles within that. So for one other thing I want to mention before I'm gonna turn it over to Mrs. Brown for a moment, as she had a really good example she wanted to share about a funding conversation she had recently, is that as key spouses, we probably need to do a better job of training you and equipping you with the ability to ask the commander questions or say, yes, sir, or ma'am, I hear what you are wanting, and that's going to require money. So where are we going to get it from? And so I think a lot of the key spouses are feeling like you are being asked to do something you're not resourced to do. And I think if we better equip you with the ability to communicate and say, sir or ma'am, how are we going to fund that? I think that it might help some things as well. So with that, I'll take a break from my talking. And Mrs. Brown, if you're still with us, if you want to come on and share the conversation that you had about budgeting and funding with a key spouse recently.
Andrea, you're so right. Listen, thank you so much for allowing me just a few minutes to be able to share this. So I am a very fortunate person to be able to travel and connect with many of our amazing Air Force and sometimes Guardian families around the globe. So recently I was chatting with a key spouse who had concerns with the funding or perhaps the lack thereof to support these events. So let me share some of what we talked about on this topic. First, rather than approaching the commander or maybe the first shirts or even your booster club a few weeks in advance to ask for money to support an event, so let's consider what funds are needed to support and to disseminate information to your unit's airmen, guardians, and families throughout the entire year and make, let's say, and present a plan. So in doing so, this annual budget will show that you are working in tandem with your command. You're demonstrating that you have thought about a way to engage and that you are raising your credibility with the commander and the first sergeants. And then of course you are serious. So with a plan in place, it also gives command teams the opportunity or a chance to plan and think through the different opportunities that may be available to them and for the money that might be available to support. So proposing an annual budget can also help start conversations to ensure that the commander and the key spouse ideas actually align and meet, or trying to align to meet the need of the unit and the families. So a little bit later, I know that Andrea is going to be able to talk about this through the training and tool updates. But for now, having a budget plan, I think, will be an asset that will empower our key spouses to be proactive, think through what is needed, build relationships and confidence with your command teams, and then ultimately encourage and support connectedness through these events. So thank you, Andrea, for letting me have this opportunity just to share a little bit about what I was thinking through and this opportunity to share. So back to you. Andrea, are you there?
There we go. My little screen wouldn't come down for me to unmute, but yes, I'm here. So thank you, ma'am, for taking the time to share that information with us. I think that's very valuable and very good points there to create a budget. And so we will incorporate that into our new training and then also give the tools and resources to make that budget. Okay. At this point, we'll pause. Are there any questions?
Hi, so we have a few questions. So I'll start with the last question first. It says, what type of events are we needing funding for?
That's a good question. And I think that probably the key spouses on the line are ones that could give better answers as to what specifically that they're trying to fund. But I've seen and received messages of things like meal trains for things like events and social gatherings for baby bundles, I think is a big thing that we've heard before. See if there's anything else in the chat. No, nobody's wanting to share what they're spending money on. But I think that those are the big things that people have used money for.
That was my question. And I guess it goes to the fact that we're not a social program. So as we work very hard to separate the two of those, like I will not plan social events or do baby things. And I try to explain to the commanders that that is a great thing for a social role, but for the key spouse, as we just support the readiness of the squadron. So I'm just trying to see where that line is between social and key spouse.
I know, and thank you for bringing that up. And it is a line in the sand, isn't it? And so connectedness is a piece that we know is going to bring a lot of conversation and need a lot of clarifying. And we don't want to limit commanders and what they think is appropriate for their units. And so sometimes it may be appropriate to have some kind of a social gathering. And so I think as a commander's program, leaving the discretion up to them and having those conversations between the commander and the key spouse of connectedness and what that means for the unit, I think it's going to have to happen at the unit level. So we're still not fundraising. We are not going to change that. We don't want the key spouses to have to fundraise. First of all, there is a requirement because key spouses are volunteers that are an extension of the command team, like written in, that there is no ability to fundraise, and we're not changing that. We don't want that to be the role of key spouses, is to be the fundraiser for the unit. And we think that's where it would head if we gave them the ability to do so, if we gave you all the ability to do so. But for connectedness, we understand that there is also a need. There may be a need to let people know who you are and introduce yourself, and that may be in a social environment. And so I see the chat is blowing up. I hope it's on good things that people have done that have helped with the connectedness of the unit. And I know that it is a fine line. All right.
Okay, so we have another question. What Space Force representation has there been in this process, specifically for inter-service transfer spouses who have valuable insight from other service branches and family support programs?
So the Space Force is just building up their program too. I'll actually be going over and working with them in this capacity for the Space Force. And so we have a POC that we've been working with and have talked to about where we're headed and what direction we're headed, and if that is a good fit for the Space Force as well. So we have had those conversations and gotten input as to if there's any other considerations that are needed along the way. Space will also join, like I said, we have the monthly meetings of all the components to talk about the Key Spouse program in the way ahead. And so we have active duty, guard, reserve, and we'll have Space here shortly that will be participating in those to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. That will become, I think, especially important when we're talking about and solidifying training. Right now, we're working on the storyboards of what the training is actually going to look like, and we'll have all components have a opportunity to say, yeah, we don't really need that for guard, but we do need this. And so there'll be some opportunity to variate the training based on the component and what is viewed as the need for the key spouse in that active duty, guard, or reserve. So we're still working that out, but we do want to make sure that we are delivering, especially a training that is going to meet the need of the population and the component. All right.
Okay. All right. So one other is recommend better training for support families during separations. Is this being considered? And could we get some guidance on this from the Army?
So support during separation.
So better training. Yep.
Yeah, so that's part of the refresh. And I think one of the things that we're looking at that is a gap that we don't have the answer to yet, but we understand it's a gap, and we're looking at it, are the 365ers. Like the families kind of fall off the roles of a unit, and how do we help to support them in the area that they're in? So that's just one issue that we know is a problem that we're looking into. There's a gap of support for those families. And then, yes, the training that is a part of the training that we are looking at and creating a storyboard for is how to best support in separations, deployments, and so on and so forth. So yes, that is a component.
So you want to do one more?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, and I just had it. Hold on one second. I am getting it back. All right. Well, I'll do this one while we get the other back. This is just saying, has Fusion is the name of a church youth group on a base, and have we looked to see what other organizations use this name? The Intel community uses it regularly as well.
Yeah, I think for as much feedback as we've gotten on Fusion, we've gotten on unit support, liaison, we've gotten on. So yes, that is part of our research and part of what we're doing. And the rename process is looking at, there was some copyright issues with one of the name suggestions. So yes, we are aware that probably whatever we choose could be applied somewhere else, but that is a consideration for what we ultimately go with if there would be too much confusion. For example, what was community support? Early on in this process, one of the top runners was community support, family support. One of them was already something that was named. I think it was for EFMP. And so we couldn't have the same name as somebody that already exists within the centers. And so, yes, that is a big consideration that we'll have is it going to cause more confusion because something else is already widely known for that set of objectives, that mission set that they're trying to accomplish. Okay, let's talk about training for a little bit. Again, I mentioned that we know busy key spouses need to have asynchronous virtual options. This will help be able to accomplish the training at your own time, at your own convenience. We're also including a session on funding, and that's never been done before. We know that it's a big question, and we need to do a better job training you on the options that are available for funding, and that we're not fundraising. And then do a better job in the training to connect like what we're talking about to the available tools and templates. And so I know that training can be really overwhelming right now. It's really long. And then like, I hear what you're saying, I hear what you're telling me to do, but what's the how? Give me a how to execute that. And so that's what we intend to do in the training as well, to show you the how as well. Lastly, I mentioned that we know that there needs to be some kind of connection with the local installation. And so the servicing MNFRCs will have that local connection meeting, and we will give the max flexibility we possibly can with that. So some installations may have like a button seat training, like they may have like the people actually there, brick and mortar, and have a class for new key spouses, and they bring in the POCs and the representatives to connect you to the faces of the resources there on the installation. It may be more like this, where it's a live Zoom call so that they can better accommodate for their population. I think of things especially like the NCR, the National Capital Region, where it's an hour commute just to get to an hour meeting and then an hour back. And so places like that may choose to have a Zoom where you're seeing the faces, you're meeting the people, you're having live conversation and engagement and interaction, but you don't have to physically be there. And so we'll lay out like the connections that have to be made, what it needs to include, but how that is executed we're going to give max flexibility so that bases can meet the needs of their population. Probably fundraising and then command team training were the biggest amount of questions that we received leading up to this event. And we know that we do not do a great job of training commanders on the Key Spouse program. We have options and opportunities to train the command spouses at the courses that the commanders are going to, but we don't have an opportunity to speak with the commanders themselves. And so where we do have that opportunity is within the installations. The military and family readiness centers do have a requirement to brief inbound commanders. And so we're creating this standardized slide deck so that we at least we know what's being briefed at base level to those new unit commanders regarding the Key Spouse program, and they're hitting the high points. And so we're working on that. We also do have the opportunity to brief new first sergeants. And so the Key Spouse program, at least while it's being refreshed, so for the next year or two, make sure that they know what the Key Spouse program is and how it can help them in their roles on the command team and as first sergeants who are charged also with taking care of families. Lastly, we are conservatively building training videos and vignettes. I say that because videos and vignettes, they seem like such a great idea, and then they're viewed 3 times over a 5-year period, and it just took you $1 million and 1 million man hours to create them, right? And so we'll incorporate these training videos and vignettes into the communication plan that we're making, so that we're targeting when we send out these videos and vignettes, and we're not going to say, hey, commanders, in your free time, would you check out this video that we just built on whatever it is. And so I think that we'll strategically build those videos and vignettes so that we can have max usability of them and then expand from there. So it'll start out with just a handful and then we'll grow. We also recognize that in any training, we do not have opportunity for feedback. So we've been doing this Key Spouse training for years now, right? But are we meeting the mark? We only know by having conversations like this, but we are looking for ways and are going to incorporate ways 6 months or a year down the road to say, hey, Key Spouse, how's it going? Did we train you on what you needed to be successful? And did we train you on stuff you never needed to know in these last 6 months or a year, so that we can have continuous improvement and refresh that training continuously to make sure that we are meeting the need and training you appropriately. All right. Any questions on training? I thought I saw one on annual training, and that's a good point because I didn't mention that at all. So yeah, those annual trainings, there's 3 of them. Well, there will be 3 of them. There's the SAPR suicide prevention, and then there'll be domestic violence awareness one, which we'll be adding into those annual trainings. So we'll have that in the initial, and then we'll have the annual trainings available as well. We are always, from Ms. Denise at AFPC's and my seats, like getting these great ideas of what the Key Spouses should be trained on and what they should do. And it's a constant, not necessarily a pushback. We don't want to seem like we're just saying no, but we are very cognizant that this is a volunteer program and we cannot consume your life in 1 million trainings that somebody feels like is a great idea. And so we're trying to keep you from the annual requirements that are just not in your wheelhouse, but we are also trying to keep in mind what we think is important for commanders and command teams, for you as Key Spouses engaged and involved with the community to have a general awareness of, like, the warning signs is what our focus is. Not that you'll have to necessarily had to step in and like, so awareness is the general theme, just to know the signs as we do these annual trainings. All right. Anything else?
Okay. We're getting a lot of questions about training in now.
Okay.
So why are we unable to train commanders about their own program?
As you might imagine, the training so commanders have trainings that they attend at their schoolhouses, right? When they become a new commander, they have a lot of things to do. And so it is very controlled who is allowed to brief there. Ultimately, we just aren't given an opportunity to brief there. So that's it. They have a lot of programs that they're responsible for as commanders, and we're just not on their list.
Andrea, can I add some clarity to that?
Absolutely.
Good morning, everybody. John Farrell. I just went to the PACAF Squadron Commanders course last week, and each MAGCOM handles it on their own. Commanders do go to a school, and Andrea said it well. You know, it's basically here's what it takes to be a commander. And in all due respect to everybody on the line, key spouse is down near the bottom. I'm just going to say it, right? Because they have to learn what it's like to be a commander. It was covered extensively last week. The lady briefed it before I did. Each command is different, though. They had the commanders in one room and the spouses in the other. And then every once in a while, they'll bring them together. I've done both, but I briefed the spouses this past week, and we were all about key spouses. And what I've also put in the hyperlink, in the chat, is a bunch of hyperlinks. Feel free to call on me. I'll add my contact data on here. Bundles for babies. I see a lot of comments like, hey, it's coming out of commander's money. No, we do that exclusively for you. It comes out of our budget. It doesn't need to come out of commanders, first sergeants, and chiefs money. So that's there. I've also added stuff like spouse employment. Andrea, thank you for the opportunity for a couple words. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for jumping in and sharing that, sir. Thank you for clarifying that. As he said, yes, MAGCOMs have different trainings, and then there's also unit commander trainings, wing commander trainings, and things of that nature. So ultimately, we get an opportunity to speak primarily with the spouse groups, the spouse command teams, and then I know that AFPC has an opportunity to speak at some of the MAGCOM commander courses. All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
Suicide awareness training needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Directions say we can only use the one on the website. Why are we not able to use the training the military members get?
Yeah, we are making that update and allowing, that seems like a harsh word, but we are opening the opportunity for key spouses to take those annual trainings with their units. So that will be an upcoming change.
Okay.
Okay.
Will there be a refresher when a new volunteer moves to a new base?
Yes. That is always that won't change. So yes. And then yes, I'll just leave it at that. And then we'll go into more details as we roll this out.
Okay. And then there's one about HeartLink. Will there be funding for HeartLink in the future since Key Spouse and HeartLink fall into the same AFI?
I'll answer it, Andrea. Since we used to cover it, and we had to make a budget decision after our board talked to us this past year. As you can imagine, emergency assistance, survival needs become job one for us. That's where the majority of our money go. When I use those words, food, shelter, water, utilities, things that require that. So unfortunately, we had to make a budgetary decision and do not cover that anymore. And I'm sorry for that. We reevaluate it every year, but we have to follow the direction of our board as well.
Okay. So I just want to add to the HeartLink question. HeartLink is still required per AFI for airmen, for military and family readiness centers. And I'll send more information out about, I don't know, being creative with funding for HeartLink.
Thank you. All right. And then I'll talk, since AFI was referenced, just let you know that in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about guides and guidances. So that is upcoming.
Can I interrupt? I apologize. I see one more question, and it's important to answer, and I get this all the time. Is there's confusion on what Red Cross provides on emergency travel and what we provide? So let me break it down very simplistically for you. The government, the Joint Travel Regulation, pays for emergency travel if the member goes to their home or record. So I'll use myself as an example. I enlisted in Baltimore, Maryland. So if heaven forbid mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister die, and I have to fly back home, if I fly to Baltimore, Maryland, the government travel regulation will pay for that, or Air Force entitlements. If I fly anywhere else, the funeral's in San Diego, Texas, or whatever, that's when you come to Air Force aid to ask. And it's always 100% grant. And one thing that's changed in the 3 years since Khalith Wright, our former Chief Master of the Air Force, became the CEO, is instead of just paying for the member, we now pay for everyone. And what I mean by that is within reason. Mom, dad, and 3 kids if they have to go back to the funeral. So that's the distinction between the two. Sorry for interrupting constantly, Andrea, but appreciate it.
Sir, this is called engagement for a reason. So no apologies needed. We want the interaction. So appreciate you for jumping in and glad you're on the line to be able to provide that clarity. So thank you so much. So let's go on just an 8 minute, since it's 2 after, we'll take an 8-minute break and we'll get back after it in now 7 minutes.